It's time to turn another piece of natural history. Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Yes, today we're going to turn another piece of natural history. Now, this is a section of the Senator. If you know your history of trees, the Senator is or was the oldest living American bald cypress in the world. It lived in Central Florida, and unfortunately the tree was burnt in 2012. This tree that I'm holding right here is estimated to be 3,400 to 3,600 years old. So think about that. Almost 1,400 years before Christ was on earth, this tree was growing. Absolutely really hard to imagine. And as a matter of fact, this is an outer bark portion. The tree was somewhat hollowed out before it was finally burnt by lightning and other issues. I'm not quite sure the circumstances of why this burnt down, but this tree unfortunately came down and is no longer. But it lived and we've recorded it, and we know that this is around 3,600 years old. So this is really, really, really cool. Now, this wood that I have to turn is charred. It's got some thickness, it's thin towards the top. I'm probably going to take advantage from a practical standpoint. I'm probably going to take advantage of this even thick area down here. I'll save this top portion for maybe another project later. I've got an idea of what I want to do, and I'm going to reveal that to you as we progress. So I'm going to take this over to the bandsaw and we're going to get started.
I can't overestimate how remarkable this tree is. This section, if you can imagine, that's just a portion of the outer part of the tree. So it's made this great big cylinder. It was a massive tree and super, super old. The thick area, there's a thick area here, and then it gets a little bit thinner. So I got to deal with that. I'm probably going to try to focus on that thicker area. But what I'm cutting through here is well over 100 years of growth. And keep in mind, this is on the very outside of the tree. So this is like the last 100 and some years of growth of this tree. It's just hard to wrap your head around this because it's quite spectacular. Now, American Bald Cypress grows very slow. The annual rings on a mature tree are typically less than 1 millimeter wide. So it's very, very tight, very, very slow growth. All right, I've got a cylinder here, and you can see how the left side here is relatively thick compared to the other side. I think I know what I want to do, but I kind of have to work with this the whole time. Now I've got this pecky cypress holes all through here, and that's very common. This is a type of rot that occurs in cypress. All right, I need to do some adjusting to my lathe. This is a little bigger than my lathe can handle, but my lathe is also adjustable. So I can pull those mid rails out, and then I'm going to move my banjo over. The cool thing about my banjo too is I can switch all of the adjustments to the other side if I need to, so they're not in the way while I'm turning. I'm even going to switch the tightening knob for my tool rest to the opposite side. This is a robust Sweet 16 lathe. If you're interested, you can check it out at robusttools.com. Now what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get the top of this, which will be the top, this will be the right side. I'm trying to get this top side to be relatively flush or flat. And I'm going to shape the bottom of this, which is the back side on the tail side. Now I've got my banjo completely wrapping around this piece. It's a little unnerving, but it seems to be okay. Now the thing with cypress is it's soft. I guess it's not really soft. It's not very dense. It's not a very dense wood. And then the fact that it has this hollow rot that's occurring inside, it's a very odd wood to cut because you're chipping away a lot of material and kind of ripping it away. And I want to flatten out this backside so that I have a good place to attach the piece when I rotate it and flip it around. So I'm going to take away, I need to take away some of this charred area. And the backside's got a pretty steep angle on it right now, so I need to slowly level that out. I'm using my 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. And I'm just making really clean passes here. And because the back side of this is not level, one side is where I'm cutting and the other side kind of dips away. You can see where it's kind of bouncing there a little bit. What I'm focusing on is putting weight down into the tool rest, not up against the turning. If I push up against the turning, I'm just going to continuously get bounced up and down because of that low spot and high spot as they come around. Instead, what I need to do and what I'm doing here is I'm actually applying a lot of downforce into the tool rest and just shifting my body weight forward. Remember, we don't move our hands or arms. From this shot, it looks like I'm just moving my hand, but my hand and my arm are fixed. I'm not letting them move. I'm just shifting my body weight forward. Here you can see my body, it's very slow because it's a slow cut, but my body is just leaning forward as I'm making this pass. Okay, now I'm going to turn around here and start shaping the bottom outer side of this as well. Wow, you can see those chunks just flying off of there. So I'm going to taper up the bottom to make this more bowl-like. Just want to take your time, let the tool do its cutting. No need to race. And again, I'm applying downforce into that tool rest and just shifting my body weight. Just let the material come around and be sliced by the bowl gouge. The passes are starting to clean up a little bit here. As flaky as this looks, this wood is pretty compact, and again, those growth rings are very, very tight. Okay, you can see I've got the bottom curve shaping up nicely. I've got all of the different holes. It's kind of a cool pattern. I'm going to use the shear scrape to kind of ease that curve. Now, unlike a traditional bowl, I'm not going to bring these sides completely up like I normally would. If I did, I would remove too much material in that thick area, and I really won't have enough to work with when I go and turn this around. Now, here, I want to show you the close-up of these grains. Look at this. Look how tight those grains are in there. We're talking 75 to 100 years right there. And this, with the angle that I just cut on it, you can see they're a little bit more exposed. Look at that. You can count them off. This piece is 50 to 75 years of growth right here. Getting down into the tenon area that you see down there is going to add another 25 or 30 so years to that. I'm going to sand this edge and just ease that edge and transition from the bottom up to the side. And I need to take my time and work this loose material out of those holes, because there's no way to truly support all of those holes. You're going to have some tear out in there. So you can take your time and clean those out. Now I want to flatten up the bottom of this before I flip it around. Actually, there's another stage I'm going to do, but I need to flatten this up first. And because I'm moving parallel to the grain growth, I can make a push cut in or a pulling cut out. I'm going to use my gouge to see, I can see I have a high spot in the middle, so I need to take away material towards the center here. I want this to be nice and flat. I'm a little leery having this mounted on centers with the tailstock here. You can see how crumbly that wood is right there. I want to make light passes and just take my time. There's a chance this could come loose very easily. Yeah, cypress is a very strange wood because it's hard and it's great to work with, but it's also brittle at the same time. So you want to be careful and take your time and make sure you have enough material to really grip. So when we do our mortise, which I'm actually going to do a mortise here. You guys don't see me do mortises that often, but I'm going to do a mortise for this piece. When I do my mortise, I want to make sure I've got a good solid foundation for the jaws of the chuck to grip into. All right, I'm going to unmount this, and I'm just going to chisel away that rough area there. It was pretty stable down closer to where I'm at now, so that's good. And I'm going to go ahead and remount this between centers. And I'm not going to try to line up on this little nub here. As a matter of fact, we're just going to shave this nub off completely here. So I'm lining up on the thick area of the bowl. And you might see that point where I was working down there and think I'm way off right now, but this is actually intentional. Now I'm going to take my time. This is why I'm using centers and mounting between centers, as I can loosen up the tailstock and readjust the face of this, or what will be the top of this bowl, to exactly where I want it. And yeah, that looks right, doesn't it? All right, so now I've got my banjo and my tool rests completely wrapping around this piece. I really want to take my time and make sure this is not going to contact anything. And I also need to make sure that my tailstock is nice and tight. We are going to do an offset or off-center bowl. And I'm going to reflatten that surface. And in doing so, I'm basically going to shave away that nub that was remaining. Again, putting force down into the tool rest is the way to do this, so we don't get bounced around too much. Okay, so we have no data of, or no information about where this was mounted originally when this was started. We are not going to remount it in that original position at any point now. So I'm flattening this bottom completely all the way across from the outside in. And remember, because this is offset, I'm only getting, on the outside, I'm only getting a little bit of contact. So you want to put that force down into the tool rests and just glide your body weight forward, and also go at a slow pace so that the tool has time to slice as you go along. It's a little more reassuring once you get the bottom straightened out. If you don't look at the outside of this piece and you just look at where the tool is in that area, it seems like it's rotating fine, like it's not wobbly. Okay, so I'm using my larger 4-jaw chuck, and I'm going to mark the outside of this. Like I said, we're going to make a mortise. I'm just going to go ahead and scribe a line where that will go. I'm touching with the left side, and I'm looking for that little scrape to be right over the right side of the dividers. We don't want the right side to touch though. Now I'm going to use my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge, and I'm going to remove some material inside this mortise area. I'm going to make a back cut here. You just want to go slow. It's just more of like a scraping or a shear cut because I'm using the side of the wing. This is also a good time to point out that my lathe speed is not very fast. The larger the bowl that you turn, the slower that your lathe should be. I've got a video all about the lathe speed. You're going to want to check that out, and it spells that out a little bit better. Here I'm going to use a dovetail scraper, and you can see there how that shape mimics the shape of the jaws. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that to undercut this corner so that it matches the same shape that I'll have on the jaws when the jaws lock into this mortise. I'll have a link for this tool and all the tools I use in this video in the description below this. Or you can also go to my website. If you go to turnawoodbowl.com, /gear, you can see all my recommended equipment over on my website. So I'm going to flatten out the surface area too. Now remember, that's where the top of the jaws will hold this mortise. The only thing that touches are the top of the jaws and the side of the jaws, that dovetail angle into the side. It's about an 11-degree angle. Okay, so we've got our mortise there. I'm going to go ahead and take this off the lathe and kind of work everything out. Don't need the drive center anymore. Now I'm going to put my 4-jaw chuck in place. And I'm going to bring this up and go ahead and mount it. You can see how I'm using that thicker area of this blank. Now, this material is less than ideal. If this were just a chunk of whatever wood and it was burnt like this, I don't know if it would be worth taking the time to do something like we're doing here. But the fact that it's one of the oldest trees in the world makes it very significant. It makes me want to do something fun with it. So I'm going to start cutting a bowl, an offset bowl, through the char here. Now this is a little bit tricky because I've got the tailstock in the way. I'm bringing the tailstock up for support right now. Quite honestly, I want to make sure that that mortise doesn't give out on the back. This wood, again, it's strong, but it's also brittle. So I don't want to take a chance that if I get a catch here or something that it's going to rip it off the lathe and send it flying, because there's a chance it could break apart into a bunch of pieces. So for the longest time, I'm going to use the tailstock, or as long as I can. You can also see that because the tailstock's in the way, I have my flute almost in an open position, meaning facing up. That's a good way to get a catch. But if you do this lightly, I'm taking and making very light passes and only removing a little bit of material at a time, you can get away with it. But again, having the flute open or pointing up like that is a good recipe for a catch. You just want to go really slow and make light passes if you're going to do that. The ideal way is to have the bowl gouge angled to the right, so you're only shaving a little bit, only exposing a little bit of that cutting edge. All right, I've got enough material removed. I need to get the tailstock out of the way, and I'm going to bring the banjo up to the front here. And you can see I'm making light passes. I'm not trying to make really aggressive cuts and remove a ton of material all in one pass. Doing so could damage that mortise in the back. You can see how brittle and how flaky this material is on the front, and you can imagine if I jar it with a catch, that's going to do some damage to the back. So I want to make sure that this stays clean and simple and makes easy light passes. Thin light passes are the way to go. I also don't want to bring this bowl down too deep. I'm going to use my depth gauge here. This is a simple little homemade depth gauge. Okay, I've got plenty of room here, so I'm going to go ahead and sharpen my tool while I'm here. Sharp tools are super important. One of the things that's dulling my tool is the char that's on the bowl here. So you want to go over and sharpen pretty frequently, but once you have your setup going like this, it's really easy. It only takes a couple seconds. I've got a course all about sharpening your tools. You might want to check that out. One of the times you really want to go back and sharpen is when you're making your last few passes, like I'm going to be doing here. I know that I can go a little bit deeper, but I want to make each one of these passes count, and I want them to be light, and I want to be taking off a thin amount, but very precisely. I don't want to rush the tool. I want it to cut and slice very cleanly so that the curve of this bowl has a nice fluid shape without any tool marks. So I make just very light passes here and finish up the shape of this bowl. Now I don't want to go too deep. My concern is that these tunnels of rot that are in this cypress could potentially bore out to the backside and be visible through that mortise, and I don't want a hole in the bottom of this bowl, so I'm not going to go too deep. If this were solid wood, I might be tempted to go a little bit deeper and get very close to that mortise, but I don't want to go too deep and have a glaring hole right through the bottom of this. You can see I've slowed the pace down. Now as I come to the center, I'm going to rotate the tool to the right, and that's called closing the flute. So the flute is now in about the 2 o'clock position. Now it's almost the 2:30 or 3 o'clock position. Before I had it at the 12 o'clock position when it was open completely upward. You can see there's a little bit of an edge. I'm just taking my time to shave that very small amount as I'm closing the flute to the right. And that's looking really, really good. You can see all those beautiful grain lines in there. I'm going to take some compressed air and clean this off. Some of that loose char is coming off, which is fine. And I can actually blow out right through those holes and get some of that dust out of there. So there's going to be a lot of that I need to do as I'm sanding here. I need to go back through and clean out all of the dust and that. And I'll do that with the compressed air. It makes it pretty straightforward. Now I'm going to shellac this. And the purpose for shellac at this point is to seal it up. Now I don't know for sure what I'm going to be doing down the road. I might lacquer this. I might do some other things, but the shellac is going to help seal it and protect it. I'm going to do all of the exposed wood first before I do the charred wood. The char still comes off on your hands, and I don't want that. So putting shellac on it will seal that in, so it shouldn't be as dirty as it is right now. It should have that sealed up, but it's also not going to make a super shiny gloss surface to it. It's going to add a little bit of sheen to it, but not a ton. It will while it's wet, but not when it dries. It'll still look dull, but that char won't come off. Now this is a relatively thin shellac. Now, I make my own shellac with pure alcohol and shellac flakes. I've got a video all about that if you want to check that out. So I'm taking my time and working through here and trying not to get on the exposed wood area because this brush is starting to get loaded with char as well. So I'm going to have to pitch this brush when I'm done. But you can see as I'm putting it on, it looks shiny, but it will dry much duller, but it's going to also seal in that char.
All right, this is the point in my videos where I tell you guys, here it is, take a look at the final piece. And guess what? I've got other things in mind for this. Now, this turned out pretty good. I like it. I really like the offset bowl in here. The one thing that's really bothering me is there's no contrast. I was hoping that this nice hemispherical bowl shape being offset would contrast the charred area significantly. However, because this has the cypress rot, which is what causes the peckiness. This is also known as pecky cypress because it has these holes in it. This is a real common, it's pretty much found in all cypress like this. The hole pattern in here makes this also feel kind of rough and organic, just like the charred area is rough and organic. So there's not a huge contrast with this. And this is probably one of the hardest things to do as a creative person, is to decide when to stop. And in this case, I'm going to keep going because I can see something else in this piece. Now, if we look at it from the side, this had a thicker area over here where we made the bowl. I was really happy with the depth of this bowl. I didn't want to go much deeper because of all those pecky holes. Even if I didn't get down to where the mortise is on the back, I could have easily gotten to an area where there were holes and it might make the back visible. So I was able to stop. I got a nice good curved shape there. It looks good, but again, it's just all rough organic. It doesn't have any kind of contrast in here. So contrast is what makes everything interesting to us in life, if you think about it. And I'm going to do a few more things to this piece. They may be controversial and I might catch some flack for it, but I'll tell you what, I've got it in my head and I got to see what it looks like in real life. So I'm going to go ahead and start the next step of this piece.
So one of the things that would contrast this rough texture and all of these curved shapes is a nice straight line. And I think a nice straight lined groove through this bowl is what I'm looking for. So I'm using my depth gauge here to determine how deep that channel is in the low area. And I don't want my cut to be deeper than that. It's about 4 centimeters. I'm using a squared off flat blade here. This is designed for doing finger joints. And I'm going to use my cross cut sled. I want to make sure I've got my marks right in line with where this is going to cut. And you can see the pencil mark right there. And I'm going to slice a channel through this. Now, the idea here is this is a straight line amongst all of this organic material, including the char. I wanted this groove to be almost as deep as that valley that's occurring naturally in the center, but not quite that deep. All right, and that's what I was looking for. Oh, that looks good. It's kind of cool how it slices through all of that organic bark and char outer layer. All right. And you can see this nice groove going through there. I need to clean this out. I need to keep cleaning this out. Now, I'm pulling out some really old materials of mine. A long, long time ago in a previous life, I used to paint signs. I painted signs before there were vinyl cut letters. Yeah. I think that was about 3 or 4 years ago. I'm not quite sure, but it was a while back, and I used to paint signs for a sign company, and I actually did it on my own as well. It's a lot of fun. I used a sign paint called One Shot Sign Enamel. This paint is amazing. It is an enamel, and it'll go on almost any surface, and it is very, very long lasting. It maintains its color. It's just a great product. If you ever run across it, sometimes you can see these or find them in art supply stores. If you know of any sign supply shops, they usually carry One Shot Sign Enamel. So I'm having a little bit of fun here. I'm going to add a lighter color. So contrast-wise, I'm using a lighter color that stands out against that black. And in this case, I'm using a blue. It's kind of mimicking a river. That really wasn't my main intention to make it look like water, but it seems like a natural way to go with this. And this channel that goes through here, all of a sudden now it becomes defined, and there's a contrast. It's a lighter color in a darker field of char, so it stands out visually. And it's also intersecting that very, very straight groove that we created with the table saw. So I'm going to go ahead and paint this in, and then I was thinking the paint would be enough, but it's so subtle down there. I actually want to add some clear epoxy on top of that. You guys don't see me do epoxy very often, but we're going to go ahead and do it. This is a 2-part resin. I've used this particular product for a countertop that I made out of barn wood, and it worked really well. It stays clear, and it doesn't have any UV issues where it colors up or anything when it's under UV light. So I'm going to just take my time and pour it very carefully into those channels. I first started out trying to move it down in there with a toothpick, but it was going to take forever, and it actually pours pretty smoothly. I'm just going to pour it down into that channel, and what's nice is it somewhat amplifies that painted stripe underneath. Now I'm going to use a torch just to move across really quickly to knock out any air bubbles and bring those to the surface. All right, now I've got this tape. Now again, working with contrasts, the contrast of blue is orange. So if we have this light blue stripe in there and we put an orange stripe across that, it's a natural color contrast. So what I'm doing is, because I have this channel is nice and flat because I used that finger joint saw blade in the table saw. It made a very flat bottom, so I can apply this tape to that bottom. I also sprayed a little bit of lacquer in there to help seal up some of those wood grains. And I'm just going to trim the edges of this. And now we have this really cool orange stripe at the bottom of this perfectly straight valley. Look how straight that is compared to the rest of this bowl. And here's the final piece. Now, this is unlike anything else I've ever made, but so is this blank. And I'm kind of working with what I had, and I feel like it's more interesting. Is it the best thing ever? No, but it's pretty cool. And it's definitely an eye-opening thing. Makes you look at it, makes you want to think for a second and have a conversation about it, I hope. I love how that very straight linear line contrasts against the rugged, charred areas. I also stopped that orange line so that it didn't cross that blue area. I didn't want it to appear as if I'm trying to make like a roadway or something like that. I just want this visual contrast between the colors and the angle and the char.
All right, here's the final piece. I gotta say, I like it. It's very cool and completely unusual, not a normal type of bowl. I want to do air quotes here. It's not a typical bowl. When I did the first offset bowl area in here, as you recall, I wasn't really thrilled with it because it didn't contrast enough with the rest of the bowl. The color contrasted a little bit, but it's still relatively dark brown against this black charred, and it's all really rough looking because we have these holes throughout the cypress. This looks somewhat still rough like the exterior, so there really wasn't a lot of contrast. So I added this river feature, if you want to call it that. I don't want to do a river table or anything like that, but it seemed to naturally call for it because there's this valley going through here. And I resined that, and it's pretty cool. It definitely contrasts with the dry, burnt black char on the outside. And then I made this stripe through here as well. Now the orange and the blue contrast one another. It's pretty subtle, and unless you're looking at this straight on, it's really hard to see that stripe really well in there. So what I'm planning to do with this is to actually mount it on the wall, and I'm probably going to mount it something like this in this particular orientation. It'll be a little bit different. This is more of a wall hanging than a bowl. And I'm really happy with it. Now, again, it's completely unusual, and I know there's going to be people that like it, and there's going to be people that probably aren't too thrilled with it, but that's just how it goes sometimes. And you got to try some different things when you're turning and you get an idea in your head. Just go with it and see what you come up with. All right, guys, I hope you liked this video. If you did, do me a huge favor, leave a comment below and let me know what you would have done differently with this piece. What would you have done that would be different than what you're seeing here? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, do me a huge favor and click that like button. Thank you. And be sure you're subscribing if you're not already subscribing. And click that bell so you're notified when my next video comes out. Be sure to check out my website, turnawoodbowl.com. Over there, I've got everything you need to know about turning wood bowls, including online courses. And I have a relatively new course in there. You're going to want to check it out. So check it out over at turnawoodbowl.com. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. And as always, until next time, happy turning.